So, what do you guys think? Do you think leadership is shifting, or do you think it's going to be a rigid halt and it's just going to be a push until Gen Z molds into the way legacy leadership has constantly been done?
Yeah, Julian, I think you're going to see a blend in that. I watch my son, and he's been in an organization for 2.5 years now. They are a family owned. They've had the same executive leadership team for 25, 30 years. They are just, hey, everything it's working, so let's just keep doing it. And then you've got this young kid who's like, we could be doing so much better, and the frustration that he is in. But the interesting piece is there's places where he says we could be doing better is standard old school tactics, but just taking them and putting them in that fresh energy. It's almost like they've become rote in some things, so they're not focusing.
And it's interesting the point that he gave, where his son is. I've learned that it's not you, it's your environment. Like everybody has a skill set they come into the world with, that they have conversation before they get here with somebody. It says, this is going to be what you're interested in, right? People are interested in certain things it's inside. So when you become who you are, you wind up in an environment that either embraces that or sees it as a threat to ego, right? And the environments that embrace it are the ones that can see the talent and see the uniqueness and make that puzzle piece work well for their machine. But I was shocked to learn the egos that exist behind large companies that say that they're for profit, but to your point of that very gray line is driven completely by the ego of whoever's in a room. And it is shocking. So advice to your son out there, just like go work for that other company that is always saying, how do we one up it, right? Like that Disney mentality. Because the people that are stuck in their ways for 30 years are not going to get stuck out of their ways.
Most leaders are really just an employee. I mean, in some ways, they have to be an ambassador to the business. It's not their own company for the most part. The most leaders in companies, not all companies, but the ones that work for a company, are acting as if they're the creator of the company on I would say persona, but in all due respect, they're no different than the frontline employee who has to take a phone call. They're supposed to do what they're supposed to do and make sure it's done. And because of that, anything that separates that role has to be kind of vetted as a survival mechanism. Am I going to put myself in a jeopardy of being cast out, not being part of a tribe or being an anomaly, or am I going to be an innovator and do something that might seem a little crazy or different? Because whatever is crazy or different, we try to shoot down. We see it in every movie. We don't understand what's coming out of space, so we just shoot at it. That's human nature, is to fight what we don't understand. So the quacky people become the anomaly and become the threat, even though they might, like to your point, Jackie, be helping bring ROI. That's a
There's
great point.
opportunity, but you're watching them and making sure, hey, where are the perceived boundaries on this?
Mhm.
So we know where to operate, and then we can begin to push.
Interesting enough, you got Scott, you're going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah. Are the people in leadership, though, looking at the new employee and being willing to make changes? Because every time we hired somebody new, they come in with a fresh perspective.
Yep.
And like, maybe that's not good. That's not good. We should make some changes. And it's vital to listen to those new folks because we've been stuck in a rut for so long.
Listening to them, I agree. That's another conversation about how we label people, and we see that label and that becomes their extent of their experience or their abilities, right? That's the human nature too. That's really a bad thing, but we do it on a continual basis. And I find it very fascinating that we love outside thinkers when it comes to liking their post, or somebody who's known as an influencer comments something or makes a great, like a Gary V comment. Oh, I love that quote. But we go back to our jobs and we don't live that quote. And I think that's to your point. We need to listen to them, and we might listen to them, but how do we apply it is a very dangerous thing in the subconscious of ourselves. To Joey's point, there's a culture and there's a tribe. And if your tribe says you have to wear a black shirt, and all of a sudden you're saying, hey, there's a red shirt too that's really good. everybody's going to look at you and say no, and that's going to make you feel threatened. And I think that's the challenge with corporate leadership. That's the challenge with corporate America, and that's the difference between the Gen Z is that they are so against rules. Their focus is on the ROI, just the return of investment. How do we get what we want? And there is no rule. And like I said, I've seen those meetings are fascinating to me. There is no leader. There is no owner. There is shareholders. Everybody's a shareholder and everybody gets a piece of the pie. Let's sit in a circle and figure out what's the best way to do this. And there's no job description. If the phone rings, the first person answers it. I mean, that hears it, answers it. That's to me, that's just it's a camaraderie of ownership.
I think it really depends on the leader and whether they have that innovative drive, or like you said, they feel they're an employee and they don't feel empowered to make the change. Obviously, as leaders, I think I heard Scott say, sometimes when you bring in new blood, that revitalizes your organization, and that's very, very true. We see that happening a lot with leaders who are in their kind of like mid to senior level. And when you bring in new blood into the organization and they start throwing these ideas, and I think that's where leaders have to be very careful, because if you shut down those new ideas all the time, if all you're saying is no, 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 then those people are going to leave and go somewhere else where their ideas are heard and where they're valued. Because when you shut somebody down all the time, basically you're telling them their ideas are not valued. Their ideas are crap and they don't matter. And so finding that balance, obviously leaders want to make sure that they're hitting the bottom line, that they're in the black and all of that. But at the same time, you have to continue to innovate, because the speed of change is incredible at this point. I don't know if you guys saw the OpenAI CEO saying, within the end of the year, we're going to have agents working with real life humans by the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's a huge change.
Yeah.
And preparing your organization for something like that, if it truly does happen by the end of the year, is a significant challenge. How do you bring in the change management? How do you upskill and reskill your employees? How do you make sure that that integration is going to be seamless and harmonious?
I think it's awesome what you just said, but one of the things I want to add to that, Suha, is the importance of understanding how to respond to an idea, which we don't have leadership training for that. I mean, what you just said is so important. And you might tell you might even be on a podcast or even say that and people will say, you're right, we need to embrace ideas. But when they're in a meeting and a new person of the company says, well, I have an idea, or hey, what about this? And people, we don't do it that way. And they just move on. They just forgot that comment. We don't apply the things we learn from a cerebral perspective. We don't apply it in our daily process. And so that's where I like to come in and say, wait, you know this, but how do you implement it in your activities? What are the behaviors that you need to be aware of in your daily life that's going to promote that? So instead of saying, I'm a leader that loves ideas, what does that look like on a daily basis? When you're talking to somebody what they did wrong or what they need to improve upon, did you ask, how are you doing it first? Let me see how you do it. And maybe it might be a better way. That encourages the idea versus saying, I need you to do this differently. And that's what I'm saying, is that we don't really coach to that, just like AI. We talk about what AI can do, and then we go back and we handpick our emails, or we handpick the way we've done it without really saying how do we implement it in our daily activity. So I agree, but I think there's a big gap there on how do you do that. And I think that's the difference I see in the business. But
well, here is the gap. Like, you guys just all summarized it really well, right? Like Suha said it. How is the change management handled? How do you implement that? How do you get your humans to react? But then what you said in that wisdom that we forget, like, that is your senior level management. That's your leadership. That's your tried and true. We've been through these experiences, right? And I think that if you preface to new employees in the younger generation of, hey, we want your ideas, but we want them to integrate well with the manufacturing chain, that sets the tone for the way information gets presented, for the way employees think about that information that they're going to present, right? Like, if we have a manufacturing train that's making widgets and you want to just paint it purple, like, why, right? And like, yes, it might be better purple. People might feel better about it being purple than rusty, but like, that project doesn't really help our ROI, doesn't help. So come to me with something else. Come to me with how we improve the rust. Come to me with how we make it better functionally and appear better, right? So when you set up your employees to understand how they need to present things to you, it also lets your senior management not say no so much, because people say some wackadoo stuff coming in the door that have only worked for you for 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah,
let's
you
be
got a
real
good
about
point.
that too.
You got a good point. The concept of, having an idea without having the backdrop of the full picture. Point. I think one of the challenges I ask people is to always be willing to have test groups and try things out. Like that way we have more data, and it satisfies the brain around logic that you need to have to get buy-in to move forward with this. If I can get a tester and show a lift, then that gives us credence to say, let's move. Maybe we should have two sets of this and see which one at the end of the quarter gives us the best ROI. And that will be the thing that we make the norm. If you duplicate it by how many employees you have, that's going to give you a better outcome. So, but it's challenging to me to see that people don't want testers. They want security. And it goes back to my human nature of threat. We don't want to feel threatened. We don't want to feel the unknown. We want stability. And the challenge of stability is our detriment, because if we are looking for something that's stable, then we're going to get upset when it's not. And we're losing the sight of innovation. We're losing the sight of being able to be creative. We're losing the sight of the market is always shifting. The weather is always shifting. If you wear a jacket because it's cold today and that's safety for me, and it gets 110 degrees here, I'm going to be suffering, not the weather. I'm the one suffering. And I think that's what I'm trying to get companies to understand is it takes more than just your process. And so I think you're right, Jackie, but it's a double-edged sword. I think it goes both ways. Roy, you haven't said anything. I'm gonna force you to say something now.
Personally, I love to hear these opinions. So many years working in that environment where all of these thoughts are pertinent and visible and our daily experiences are not mine anymore. In my geographic location, the group that I work with here are the ones that I see the most are 80% Gen Z, right? And it's an interesting dynamic to watch. They're exactly as you say, they're, no rules, let's break it, then we'll fix it. Let's just do whatever makes the most sense right now, no matter what, consequence may come. There's a lot of guidance to be given, but they want that free reign. I can tell you in some of my other locations and when I'm traveling and the age demo changes drastically, right? So Miami is the only space where I have that 80-20 Gen Z, everybody else. In every other location, it's Gen X that holds the largest employee population. And so they're very different, right? They're very, what are the rules first? And then I'll fit into that rule set versus this Miami group. And to be honest with you, the Miami group gives me the most ideas to implement across the board, no matter where I'm thinking about it. I run into freedom of thought in a different way than I run into in all of the other locations. And, 25 years or 24 years in corporate America. And so me being Gen X, right, I have that swing where sometimes I'm so aligned with the one or two millennials and the 20 Gen Zers. And then there are some times where I kind of have to fall this way to the Gen X thought process because I need to make sure something doesn't break or they need to make sure something doesn't break because I don't want the consequence of it.
Yeah.
But I can see this situation from both sides. Now, I can tell you that, sitting in the C-suite for so long and dealing with people that I reported to, there is very little to no notion in that room or yearning in that room to want to get to what does Gen Y, Gen Z want, right? What do millennials, what do Gen Z want? That's not what that room is looking for. That room is absolutely looking for a couple of the statements that were said before. How do we stay in the black? How do we make that black explode to exponential numbers? And that's the only formal concern. even having an HR person in there or someone else to kind of help guide it doesn't really do the trick or to get it to work.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think it goes back to I think what Joy was saying. There's a line where there's a political nuance that you have to keep in mind. Your audience, know your audience, right? So to your point, though, it's hard to go in to say, "Hey, we want you to make change," and then just keep it the same, though. It's almost like a square saying, "Hey, I want to be a circle, but don't cut any edges off." It's an oxymoron, but it is one of those natural like tendencies or tensions that takes hold. But to your point, you said something that's pretty powerful, and you guys heard that. He's around the Gen Zs give the most ideas, and I think it's really fascinating that if anybody were to be afraid of what's happening with AI is to first understand it, because once you understand something, it's not a fear. It's something that makes sense to you. So if you will jump out of a plane, if you knew how the parachute was folded, you knew the person that was doing it, you've seen it done over and over again. You've done it, every time you do it, you don't have the fear because you have an experience in it. And I think that's the challenge. And I'm still fascinated with all the conferences I've seen happen, and they have people my age talking about AI when you got, 1,000 millionaire Gen Zers that are using it on different levels that are not in corporate. That's who should be invited to those conferences. Have those guys talk about it because they're talking from an experiential perspective, from a real ground root experience, not from here's what I saw on YouTube and I'm converting it to my own process.
The conversation on AI and younger generation, I think it's just like with agents, as we start to introduce them, we have to put guardrails and make sure that they are working within the confines, that they're not, going out and doing the wrong thing, making the wrong decisions. I think with new employees, you also want to kind of apply the same thing because they're new to your organization. So you have to, and I read an article on Harvard Business Review, and they refer to it as guardrail, as scaffolding, actually. So you build up the scaffolding so that you're giving them the space to do what they need to do and to fail, but you have the scaffolding up there to protect them and protect your organization. And as they gain experience, you start to remove that scaffolding and give them more, kind of like, and you empower them to do more because now they've gained that experience and they know how to do it more. You're doing that with AI, and you should be doing that with your new employees as well, so that they know that they have the room to do what they want to do, but it is within that scaffolded environment that protects them and the organization as well.
I appreciate what you're saying, 1,000%. What I wanted to focus on is the concept of safety and our subconscious not wanting to be the anomaly, because of that feeling of outcast is something that's deep rooted in us since childhood. You go to a new high school, the first thing you want to do is find how do I fit in, not how do I stand out. And I think that's part of our DNA in a tribe. Tribalism is a form of safety. If you don't have that tribalism, you're in danger, because an outcast is never accepted. And I think, to Joey's point and to your point, that scaffolding is tribalism to some extent. And, that's sometimes that tribalism is actually shaded by the concept of protocol. Like this weird, like somebody once said, everybody goes to the dentist not to focus on the good teeth, but I want you to show me the bad teeth. And that's what a coach is. That's what a consultant is. Let me show you where the decay is. And you're going to hate me for it. It's going to hurt. But I think it goes back to that same concept. It's like, I'm here to tell you what's missing, not to tell you what's working to make you feel good. And I think that's where leaders could literally take a lesson in, is understand your own psyche. Know that your ego is always going to be the first reaction you have to anything that's hitting you as a leader. When you come in with your title as I'm the leader, you're already at a disadvantage to really learning. And I think that's what Roy is saying is the Gen Zs, they don't see it as leadership. They see it as expression. I'm just being my natural self. And I think we're seeing that shift in business. But I 100% agree with you. There's scaffolding. But then you got to ask, is it scaffolding because we couldn't fit the turkey in the oven, so we cut the legs off? Or is it because we just want to keep cutting the legs off the turkey? The oven's big enough now. We don't need to cut the legs off the turkey, but we make all these reasons behind why we do it. And I think that's what I was getting at.
In a circle, all the way back, full circle moment, those egos that are driving all of the this is how we do it are also driving the AI conversations. Because to your point, they're afraid to implement any of it. They can't really understand it, and their ego kind of just shuts down. So there's a lot of leadership cultural change that has to happen before AI really takes its rightful place in business.
Yeah, well, on the neuroscience level, you hit on something really, and it goes back to my meeting with Bruno, is that authenticity is easily defined in our gut. We pick up genuinity and we can tell instinctively when something is inauthentic. And that's where I like to teach that part of that. And to your point, Scott, it isn't woo-woo anymore. Science has proven that there is a energetic vibration of authenticity that is felt through people's conversations, even their typing, their posts, all those things are pretty much picked up. And to your point, Jackie, yeah, and I mean we're inundated with AI now, so it's its own personality basically. You can see it coming. It's almost like I won't call it a demon. It's a spirit inside a person's like information that they're giving. It's like, oh, that's the spirit of AI right there. You can pick it up, and you're picking up this vibe that's not genuine because it comes from something that's not from their own heart or from their own brain. It's something they've attached to themselves. Because I want to get to that subconscious level on the business level. I want to get to the psychology or the behaviors around what we do and improve upon those. Because if you improve the behavior, then that is the root, the nucleus of what you're trying to change. If you don't change the behavior, all you're doing is putting a checklist together. And you can't, I can give you a checklist on how to fly a plane, but it doesn't mean you're actually going to feel comfortable doing it. So I just want to get to the root. I want people to, and seems to be, it goes against a corporate way of life, if you will. I'm the anomaly in the tribe. So this, but I want us to think about our own behavior, like our own subconscious, like where we put the brakes on, where we have our own mindsets, where we stop things, and where does it come from? It usually comes from survival mechanism, a sense of fear or a sense of I need to get. And I think that's where, to Roy's point, this person needs to get authority. He needs to get people to respect him or something like that, or fear of failing or fear of being discovered. Any of those things. That's usually what happens in everything that we're reacting to. So just something to think about this week, and for especially those who are leading people or even working with people. Everybody. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Thanks for joining. Have a good week.